Welcome to the Time Management Podcast with me, your host, Abigail Barnes. I'm a productivity coach, global speaker, time management author, and award-winning entrepreneur on a mission to share the 888 formula with the world and to remind you that it's your time. Leave it to me to bring you new time management tips, tricks, tools, and strategies, to introduce you to guests, research, and case studies from around the world, and to give you a simple 5-step process you can follow to uplevel your productivity, achieve your goals, and create a life that exceeds your wildest dreams. I'm so excited that you're here, so let's get started. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited today to be joined by special guest Marc Champagne. Marc, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's an honor to be here. I can't wait to jam with you. We've just met, but I feel like you're one of those individuals, and I feel like our relationship is one of those situations where it feels like years already. There's just an instant connection. So I don't take that lightly, and want to thank you for you being you and the energy that you put out into this world.
I don't either, and I am so excited. Let's dive straight into the episode. Who is Marc Champagne in a nutshell?
It's a question I've asked many, hundreds of people at this point on my own podcast. I think who we are, who I am, is always evolving. But if I think of baseline or the through line of what resonates the most with me right now, it's just I'm a curious human being that is doing everything possible to help others along with my work and so forth. But for me personally, to be as present as possible in the beautiful gifts of time, essentially, like what we're doing right now, and just focusing in and bringing mental fitness and all of my practices to help do that, so that it's not thinking about 10 minutes from now or 10 minutes ago, and just be here and enjoy that gift of the present moment. So that's me.
I love this answer. For the benefit of the listeners, your CV would say you're a keynote speaker, a transformational trainer, and author of this amazing book that we are going to speak about, Personal Socrates. Talk to us about your relationship with time in the early days, in your early life. What was time? What did it mean to you?
I mean, what comes to mind is my relationship to time. I feel like I've always had a somewhat healthy relationship, but what's evolved over time is that there's less and less people outside of my kind of internal world that are controlling my time. And if I think about it, I'm sure you can resonate with this, having spent, a good amount of time in the corporate space as well. When I was in that in brand and product management and sales, of course I could do some blocks in my calendar and so forth, and I've always tried to prioritize some stillness in the early morning. But for the most part, I've been operating on other people's timelines and allowing them to dictate where my energy is going and so forth. And not to say that there's still some of that. I'm getting better and better at, first and foremost, checking in with myself to see, okay, here's how this week went, here's where the energy and the time went. Looking at next week, are there any edits that I can make so that I have more control over time, and am I investing time in the right places based on where I want to be heading? It's those check-ins that have provided, and this takes 15 minutes on a Friday, but it's been the thing. I call them almost like PhD Fridays, because it's a review of everything that's happened. It's, what did I learn? What would I have changed? And specifically looking at my calendar. And then most importantly, what can I celebrate about the week? It gives you that micro opportunity to make some little edits for the week to come, right? And then those all stack, and then all of a sudden it becomes, okay, well, I feel more and more in control with where I'm investing, time and energy, and who I'm investing time and energy with.
Fantastic. What I'm really hearing you say is that time wasn't something that you ever had too much of a drama with over the years. And obviously, in your corporate career, time is the 9 to 5. And then now in running your own business and being the boss, you are able to use time in the way that you want to use it. And I love that.
I do. You know what? I will say one thing in the corporate world, because I feel like people would relate to this. I remember when I first started in sales and, was doing that job, and there was always the intention I didn't want to stay in sales. The goal for me was to get into brand and product management. That was always the objective. But in the industry I was in, the entry point typically was sales and then market research and analytics and so forth. And that's the exact path I took. But I remember being in sales outside of the main head office and in the territory as I was about to move. And in this case, this was a move to Montreal, Canada, to work in the head office to start in market research and analytics. 90% of the people had a comment like, "Oh, get ready. You're about to lose all of your autonomy. You're about to just get nailed with hundreds of emails per day, and you're just going to be working. You only have the opportunity to do your actual work in the evenings or early mornings." Over and over again. I said, wow, this is not super motivating, obviously. I got into the office. Sure enough, a bunch of emails started to come in. But this is where I think the relationship with time really started in a healthy way. I started to prioritize email blocks in the day. And still, for the first couple hours in the morning, got the deep work or the thinking kind of work done, and then jumped into the email and cleared everything out. I just remember because and I don't say this from a place of ego, but this then happened again when I was going to the next job. Oh, the volume of emails and meetings and all this is just going to bury you. It's okay. Well, I've heard this before, and I remember thinking, I don't think I have anything super special here that I'm doing other than being efficient with time, because I've never, and I don't say this from a place of judgment, but I'm pretty near an inbox zero kind of individual because it just I don't like the feeling of seeing these number bubbles. And I remember we would look at others, colleagues, their phones and like their emails, hundreds, and some. I remember one individual had 10,000 or something unread emails. So just looking at your phone is giving me anxiety. This is crazy. Anyway, sorry, a bit of a rant, but I feel like many of us, and there are other areas in my life where where there are inefficiencies, but if we just spent a little bit of energy looking at how we can be more efficient with the time that we have, we can actually create more time to do the things that really matter. And it doesn't have to be super complicated.
These are such top tips. I love them. And I also love that you reframed somebody's beliefs about how it was going to be for you. You reframed it to, this is how it's going to work for me. And then this is how it worked for you. It's the basic laws of manifestation. You attract to yourself what you believe. And if you believe that you are going to be swamped, you will be swamped. And if you believe that you were going to handle it, you are going to handle it. So I love that. Thank you for sharing. You, Marc Champagne, are the author of this absolutely incredible book, which comes in a beautiful box and has a fabulous little bookmark, which in a day and age where everything is on a screen and we're not used to holding things, it is such a revelation to have such a stunning book. The publisher has done a fabulous job. It's beautiful. You're also a keynote speaker and a transformational trainer working with individuals, audiences, groups, organizations around the world. But how did you get here?
Oh, that is such a good question. There was no intention. I never, there wasn't a plan or set of goals to, first of all, write a book or host a podcast or, work with these teams as a essentially strategist for their minds is kind of how I see myself in this world, coming from brand and product strategy. It was almost forced upon me because when I started in sales, I remember, and you probably remember these times as well, this happens less and less now, but people used to be hired in batches, especially sales teams. And I was part of that, and I remember actually flying out to Montreal and there was a whole group of us being trained on the products and selling skills and, just kind of level set based on our education. And I remember thinking, well, if this is a sales function and we're all coming out kind of the same robots in a way, how possibly am I going to stand out and make the top bonus or be at the top of the list? And for whatever reason, the thought came to mind, well, I'm just going to get up 10 minutes earlier and start studying interesting people And at the time, like the Tony Robbins of the world and Success Magazine and just biographies, I was just consuming content that was inspiring, that stimulated reflection. And what I quickly started to realize that it it almost didn't matter who I was reading about or what topic I was reading about. There was always these beautiful and powerful reflective questions that were being left. So I would write them down. And then I would journal on those questions either in the moment, or I'd almost save the question for the next morning and wake up super excited to spend some time reflecting on it. Because then I felt like I'd start the day on my own terms, that I've cleared out some mental clutter or some mental debt, and just felt primed for the day. And just did that over and over again for essentially a decade. Until eventually because I was doing this digitally at one point. I was traveling a lot, and I didn't want to keep an additional notebook in my bag. A lot of that's changed now. I would say I'm probably more analog now, just given our technology has evolved so much to the point that I think we do need digital detoxes. And this is now I see writing in a notebook or reading a physical book as a gift of stillness in a way. But at that time, I was doing it digitally, and there was nothing that really existed to help guide people into essentially a mental fitness practice that many of us know as journaling. There was a lot coming for meditation. So around the same time as the big meditation apps were reaching the mainstream market, like Headspace and Calm and so forth. But at that time, there was just nothing like that for journaling. So I set out, I emailed my brother-in-law actually, because he was the closest person I knew that had any kind of technology experience. Said, hey, here's the frustration. Would you be interested in creating something to solve this, at least my challenge? And I feel like there are others that would be, interested in something like this. And let's start it up. So we did. We launched it. It reached a bunch of people, nearly 90 million people in the first couple of years, which was wild to even. It still is wild to even talk about, because we're not app developers. I was using a lot of product strategy that I had learned in the past industry to collaborate and bring content in. Basically, to make this long story a little bit shorter, I've been practicing I guess you can say, the art of curating really good questions at the right moments in time for me personally. Then now I do this with teams, and the app was one medium to get that kind of work and that message out there. And then the book became almost like an analog version of the app in many ways. Obviously a lot more focus given the restraint of how much you can put in a book. But what you're experiencing, very similar to what the app was, is quick topics, quick individuals, a very curated set of questions to get people to pause and think, because I really do think that we're all one question away at any moment from either a different life, which is kind of the grandiose version, but then also one question away from a different outcome or mood at any point. So the book is a version of that medium to help people just pause and look at topics or look at our own life and our own work from different perspectives, and using historical figures like the Maya Angelou's or Jane Austen's or Kobe Bryant and Robin Williams and so forth, just to come back to some fundamental questions to allow us to take a pause, check in with ourselves, and give ourselves a few minutes to course correct or edit our path. That's all it is.
There's a lot to unpack here. So I am going to go through it bit by bit by bit, break it down for the benefit of myself and also the listener. You started in a corporate career. What I'm hearing you say is then you discovered that questions and asking yourself questions was beneficial. For the benefit of somebody who is new to this, what actually is journaling?
I'm so happy you asked that question, because journaling, I find, depending on who I speak with, it, it, it's a loaded term. I often, especially in the early days, less now, but in the early days, would get something like, "Oh, so journaling, you're talking about the individual writing about the crush at school or something like that in their diary," which there's nothing wrong with that, but not necessarily. I'm talking about everyone that I've studied are all journaling in some capacity, because the definition to me right now is it's just reflection. And it happens to be that there are different ways to do it. The kind of the Hollywood version of that is kind of pen to paper with a candle burning kind of thing. And that's what many of us see. And that's a beautiful ritual if that works for you. But it also can be using some technology if you've got good control over your notifications and whatnot. That's a whole other topic. But it can also be just taking a walk after lunch and asking a question. And you don't have to use questions, but I find it can be quite daunting if you don't have any kind of guidance and let's just, for simplicity, think of a notebook and you open up to a blank page. Of course, you can start to free write and just, unleash what's in your mind and clear out your mind, which is super helpful. But for people that have never done it in the past, that's usually a big ask. And what I see often is people then will come back and say, I can't do it. I'm not really sure about the benefits of this. So that's when you get into questions that are either, check-in type questions. Like, how do I feel right now? One word. How does my mind feel? How do I want to show up today? Again, it could just be one word. And you start building these self-awareness muscles, which this is where the mental fitness part comes in. Because the more you do that, the more that as the day goes, you start realizing or recognizing, oh, wow, that email threw off my mind. Why? Like, what is it behind that? And that's journaling right there, just that act of reflection. So yeah, I'll stop there because I mean, there's obviously much I can say on journaling. It's definitely my passion.
So to clarify, journaling can be either analog, a piece of paper and a pen, either writing down what is washing around in your mind right now or answering a question. It can be taking yourself on a walk and considering what's triggered you, considering a question, processing it, or it can be going the digital route and probably with airplane mode, writing like I do sometimes in the notes on my phone, just continuous writing.
Yeah. I mean, those are the mediums, right? But I'd invite everyone to think what medium makes most sense for you. I tend to use all of those now, and I'm less hung up on, oh, I need to have a bookshelf of journals over the years, and I need to see all of those journals so I can pick them up and look at them. And I have some of that, but more so, well, if I'm on a plane or if I'm out for a walk or something, and something comes to mind where, again, the definition of journaling is just reflection, where I need to think about something or process something or ideate about something. It's whatever tool I've got available. And sometimes that's an audio note in a journaling app or just using your phone. That's the part I'd love people to kind of walk away from is to not get too hung up on the medium. Give yourself the options, but to really think about giving yourself the gift of thought and thinking, because I think that's where we've lost a lot of that. And this is what shows up with 100% of the people that I study. They're all prioritizing time to think in some capacity, right? Maybe 80% of them are meditating, which there's a lot of discussion around that, but 100% of them are asking really good questions and taking some sort of time to just think. That's where all the insights, the ideas come up, or where we can understand whether, okay, I'm here today and I want to be here tomorrow. Is what I'm doing, is where I'm investing my time and energy, is that getting me closer, or is that subtly pushing me farther and away? Like, that's where those insights come up. And the more we do this, the more we protect ourselves from hitting that wall that many people do. And all of a sudden 10 years goes by and how did I get here?
I'm loving this. I'm loving unpacking this because, in my experience, it's such a simple word, journal, but it can be very charged. Because what I'm hearing you discussing and explaining is the creative process where you're evolving an idea, where you are developing what it is that you are here to do, who it is you are here to become. On the other hand, it is also a mental health tool where we can get the overwhelm, the anxiety, the voices that are washing around in our heads down onto the paper and empty out. And then the two can overlap. And this is where it then starts to become a grey area. So it's great to discuss it. It's great to understand that it can do multiple things. There are multiple ways to do it. And in essence, what I'm hearing you say is there's no right, there's no wrong, there's just your way. Understanding it's a process that has been used by hundreds of people for decades.
Since the beginning of time, literally.
On that note, let's dive into one of the examples that you give in your book is Jane Austen. It was crazy even reading that she was born in 1775. I feel like it was only 100 years ago that she was born, the 1900s, because the stories are so relevant right here, right now. We talk about them. We've seen multiple different actors and actresses act out the same books over and over again. She feels like she is so recent. In the book, you have this great question from her, which is, who are the characters of my internal empire? I love that. Can you just unpack that for us?
I will. But first, because I feel like many wouldn't know, I didn't know this until I started doing the research, because I had the same sentiment that you just described around she's so well known for her beautiful works of art, but that didn't happen until she was long past. I mean, she wasn't famous in her time living on the planet as a writer. That all happened many years after the fact. So with that being said, though, it comes down to, or the questions I was asking when I was doing the research were around, well, why is her work so relevant? It literally is in education programs and globally recognized. Like, what is it about her work that makes it so marvelous? And what are some of what are her angles into, storytelling and writing and so forth? And what kept coming up, if I think of her books as well as the movies, of course, that have been created from her stories and her work, it's all the characters. It's the character arcs and the weaving of different characters that you get attached to, and you see where they're going, and you're curious about, well, where's that, in some of the cases, like, where's that relationship or romantic relationship, where's it going to go? The whole book, and everyone that I studied, is always through the lens of, is there something here? Is there a perspective here based on, in this case, Jane Austen and how she writes her books, that we can use for where we're at in our life personally and professionally? And then that's where that question came up. Well, okay, if that's how Jane Austen's work really resonates with people, then who are my characters? Who are the people in my life, past, present, and ideally, as my story continues, who do I want in the next chapters of my life? It's, again, leveraging, everyone knows Jane Austen, and leveraging that whole story angle to then just take a moment to think about, okay, who are the people that are most significant to me right now? Do I still need or want those relationships in my life? Are they serving me or not serving me? And if they're not, it's not necessary. Like, let's not judge that. Let's be grateful for those relationships. But kind of full circle in terms of the question you asked me to start the show, who are you? I mean, who I am now is different from 8 years ago. So it's not surprising to think that there are different people in my life, and it's okay to just be grateful for those relationships and let them fizzle out, and then give us the opportunity, and this is the fun part or the freeing part, to design and write our next chapter, or the next part in the book. And that's when you get into the follow-up questions around, okay, well, this is where I want to be heading, and this is the direction that makes most sense to me. Who do I need to start surrounding myself to support, that direction? And then you can just bring in the characters, and whether you know them personally or not. That is the beautiful part about the technology and the world we live in today. I mean, you could have a whole board of directors that you don't know, which I do have, for different areas of my work as well as personal life.
I have a committee, an internal committee. These are the characters in my life. Can you clearly identify any characters in your own life that are past, present, future? Who is at your board table?
Yeah, so I can, because I'm always thinking about this, and the board of directors, or the committee, I guess you could say, they change out, at least on my side. This is not a hard rule, but they kind of change out quarterly based on what's going on with my life and where I feel like I need the most guidance. So as we speak right now, three that come to mind are Oprah when it comes to media and interviews and just creating that whole business world of integrating, story and narrative and the media empire that she's created. And that's just because I've got, quite a few media projects that are in their infancy, outside of the podcast, of course, that I'm just trying to learn from her. And I don't know Oprah personally. We're not having dinner, but I mean, I have her podcasts, I have her book, and like she's accessible in terms of to understand her mind. The other one that's been top of mind, and we were talking about this before hitting record, is Robin Sharma, his insights and whatnot, and I get a lot from him and his books when it comes to just mental fitness in general, and just keeping my mind as mentally fit as possible so that I can see the path forward and keep things clear and say, okay, that, these are the shiny objects over here, but this is the actual path. So his books are always either on the desk or in my ear if it's an audiobook. And then lastly, from a business perspective and having different acts to your business, I have Arnold I can never say his last name. I just can't do it. But you know what I'm talking.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
There you go. Because I don't know if you or the listeners and viewers have watched or read his latest book, which is quite good. It's titled Be Useful. But there's also a really good 3-part documentary on Netflix as well, just going through his different acts from bodybuilding to being an actor to politics and philanthropy and all of that. And they seem like they're not connected, but they're all very much connected and all very intentional. And I find it very inspiring to kind of go behind the curtain and see what some of the things that he was thinking about. So that's the board members as we speak.
These are fantastic top tips. So we're all being mentored by people that we may never meet. One of mine's Taylor Swift. I think she is incredible how she interacts with her fans. Her brand has become so global. Let's dive into what's your perspective of time today? How do you use it to create the business, the life, the lifestyle that you want? What are you doing? What are you not doing? How are you managing it?
For me, it's constant check-ins with myself, and where I'm feeling stretched and where I'm feeling, I guess another way to say this is, where am I pushing a lot versus flowing with a natural direction of either projects, relationships, and tasks, I guess you could say. Not to say that everything has to feel amazing all the time. We're in tax season over here in Canada, so that never feels great. But in general, when I look at the big buckets that are important to me in my life, family, adventure, business, and for me, I need my makeup very much requires time in silence and alone time. I'm also an only child, so maybe that's why as well. So I look at those big buckets and then see, well, am I supporting each of them in various ways with where I'm investing my time? And it's good timing to ask this question because the last couple weeks I've felt kind of overwhelmed. And I had to, for me, I'm a very visual person. I had to visualize everything that was in play. And that's usually the question that I journal on, is like, what's in play right now? And I just created a visual of short-term and mid to long-term, as well as network expansion projects. I had a kind of a triangle with 3 buckets. And I started listing out all of the either relationships or projects that are active or that I'm actively pushing forward. And there were something like 36 projects, which I kind of zoomed out and thought, well, this is why I feel overwhelmed. This is not sustainable. And of course, not every week is, I'm dedicating, but they're on the mind. So that's a lot. So again, without judgment, just, well, this is the reality of the situation over the next few weeks, and I'm giving myself the time for this to naturally happen. I set a rule that I can only prioritize 3 of the big projects to move forward each week. And I just color code it right now on, okay, here, I'm going to make sure that these ones are moving forward and invest some time, whatever that looks like. And then also intentionally, I'm going to start editing out projects that are interesting, but maybe not the right timing for them. And that's slowly but surely happening as well. And surprise, surprise, I mean, relationships or connections or things they've been coming in to support that exact scenario of just editing or cleaning up, what I'm working on, which feels good. So I'm not there yet. I mean, still, there's still a lot of stuff going on, but Friday, like I said, I'm going to look at that visual, and I'm going to look at next week and make any edits that don't support the focus that I want to have.
Your book is called Personal Socrates. Can you just talk to us about what the Socratic method is?
Well, so probably like most listening, unless you've gone to law school or have a degree in philosophy, you've probably just heard of Socrates, and that's kind of it. And I was the same way. But then when I was chatting with the CEO of the publishing group that I'm a part of, I was explaining how I've been using questions over the last, to 12, 15 years, and how questions were surfacing on the podcast that I host, Behind the Human. He said, "Oh, well, that's the Socratic method, which is essentially just asking a big question, or in my case, collecting a big question, and then asking follow-ups to get to the core of whatever you're trying to solve or wherever you're trying to get insight." Now there's so much literature written on this. Like we can in the academic world, you can easily complicate this whole thing, but really that's what it is. You're asking a big question and you're asking follow-up questions to get clearer and clearer. What really interested me about this is that, because I didn't want to call the book Personal Socrates, I felt, I'm not a philosopher. I don't pretend to be one, and I don't see the link until I started to look up and study a little bit more about Socrates and the method and his story, and realized here's someone that is, he's long gone physically, but we all use this method daily in some capacity, but just, are we using it intentionally? Because we're all asking questions. It's just, are we asking high quality questions, the right ones, and enough of them, is essentially kind of where I've landed. So the idea was, well, if the method clearly it works because it's still around, is there a way to just modernize it, and that we don't even really have to think about it, but we're thinking a little bit more intentionally about the questions we are asking? It's just simple things like, do I want to move to this country, or move here, for example? You can ask that question, or you can ask, why do I want to move there? How would that location serve me best personally and professionally? What are the pros? What are the cons, and so forth? And get past, like, we're so surface level typically with the questions that we ask or people ask of us. So that's what the method is designed to do, and how all of, I think you provided a great example with Jane Austen. It starts with, who are the characters of my internal empire, but then as you read through the profile, you're being guided with more and more questions to get really clear on, well, if are these the right people based on where I'm heading?
Mark, what is your earliest memory of question asking? Where did it come from? Or do you feel like you've just always naturally done it?
No, it comes, I don't know the age, but probably around the same age that my son is right now, who's just turned 8 yesterday. I was around that age, and I remember I had an uncle who lived in the city, and I was born and raised a few hours outside of Toronto, Canada, and he'd come visit, and he'd get me up at a god awful hour in the morning, like 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning for for a young kid is quite early. He'd get me up and he would bring me out to a coffee shop, and typically he'd buy me like a hot chocolate of some sort. I remember those moments so clearly because he would just ask me questions. He'd say life stuff. Have you spoken to your grandmother recently? Have you given her a call? How are you doing in school? What's going on? And just question after question, just to stimulate, well, first of all, conversation, but they were authentic questions that, as I reflect back, I didn't know this in the moment. He was teaching me valuable life lessons around, where essentially, as I'm speaking to you, like, where am I spending my time? Am I prioritizing people and the family members and whatnot that I love and that love me? And I really do. And we did that for years and years, to the point where when I was older, I used to spend a month at their house, my aunt and uncle in Toronto, during the school break. And essentially that just continued. And that was actually my view into the business world because they were both entrepreneurs. And so I really credit both of them actually for a lot of the work that I'm doing now, that I just, again, I didn't have a goal to get into this work, but it seems like the seeds were planted at a young age.
What an incredible gift. It sounds to me like they awakened something that was in you and then nurtured it. And in life, this is how we get to the quote unquote success, is by building the muscle, and the muscle comes through repetition. And if we enjoy that repetition, then we will continue to do it. And if we don't, then we will stop.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We just have to follow the nudges, right? And follow the breadcrumbs. And we all have the answers to a lot of the questions we have. It just comes full circle to that prioritization of being still and allowing ourselves to think. Go and take a walk, go into nature. I mean, what works for you. The question I would leave everyone is just to list out 5 to 10 activities or rituals or practices that, you know, when you do these things, put you in a happy state and that you feel good, right? Because when we can do that, and they're all different, I mean, there's for sure crossover, but when we do that and we have those practices and activities built into our schedule, just automatically gives us that time to process and to clear out the mind. And then all of a sudden, when the mind is more clear, it's just like a neatly organized library. We can retrieve information versus that spare room that is jammed floor to ceiling with boxes, right? And there's something there I have to get, but I have to literally empty out the whole room to get to it. That's often and I see this with teams all the time. This is where it links to business, that people are so overwhelmed and stressed and there's so much to do. It's nearly impossible to make really great decisions and clear decisions from that place.
I feel like we've got the title for your next book there, Mark, The Hoarder Mindset, how to clear out the clutter so you can think straight. I can't wait to read that. What's the number one thing that you wish the humans knew that they don't?
How accessible what I call mental fitness is to every single person, because everything that we've been talking about, I define or classify as some sort of mental fitness practice, whether it's journaling or taking time to just breathe consciously or walk or meditation. There are a million different things, just like physical exercise. Just because you may not like to run doesn't rule out all of exercise, right? There are a million different things. So I wish, what I get often is, I can't meditate. Well, then don't meditate. Do something else. That's where that question comes in around, like, list those 5 to 10 practices. For me, meditation, I'm getting more and more into it actually right now because I'm finding benefit. But for the longest time, I would be frustrated as well with meditation. So I found breath work and doing, a minute of guided breath work, or 2 or 3 minutes, and sometimes 20 minutes. And it's the non-negotiable in my routine. If, for some reason the routine is thrown off, if there's one thing I have to do, it's that to start the day. Because again, I feel, just like back into the journaling and studying interesting people, I feel when I start the day off like that, even though if it's chaotic and I didn't sleep well or whatever the case was, it feels like I'm starting the day on my own terms. Because I've done 2 or 3 minutes of breathing and regulated and calm my nervous system, and my mind feels clear, and now I'm ready to go. I want that to be accessible, because it is. It's just, we need to think about how we can integrate that into our schedule. And it doesn't always take, 14-day silent retreat to access this stuff. Those are super helpful for sure. But usually, they're, again, intimidating. So I don't have time for that. But we all have a few minutes to start the day off.
Tell us something you do with your time that you think that most people don't.
I spend a lot of time learning and in a mental fitness, I guess you can say, flow. And because it's not rigid. I spend probably an hour and a half in the morning at this point, early in the morning, with blocks of reading and inspiring the mind, with blocks of journaling to clear out and process what's going on, with blocks of physical movement and exercise, and then some breath work and so forth. And it seems like a lot of time, but it's the thing. If I do an hour of that, it just makes the other 23 hours so much more efficient and so much more energizing, including how well I sleep or don't sleep. So it's the staple for me.
This question is for me, but it might also benefit other listeners. What process do you use to map out your books, your work, your talks? Is it analog? Is it digital?
That whole exercise of visualizing the projects, I used Apple's product, Freeform, to do that, which essentially is a digital version of a bunch of Post-it notes. Again, I go back and forth from print and analog to digital, because what I like about, in this case, with the digital offering, is that it's with me all the time. And this happened this week. I was in Toronto, in the city, and I needed a few minutes just to kind of regroup. Once again, there was a project that kind of came forward, and I had to see, like, is this going to support the mind map, I guess you can say. So I was able to pull that up on my iPad, and they're all color coded, and I can move things around. And like I said, I'm a very visual person. It's like a breath of fresh air when I can just take a look and see, this is everything that's in play right now in my life. I can see it on one page, or if it's Post-its on a wall, right here. And the book was structured like that. There was a wall of Post-its, essentially, that kept moving around and slide. There's something about zooming out and seeing everything that is so powerful and can be used in so many different ways.
What's one question you wish you'd been asked that you haven't been asked as we wrap up this podcast today?
What I did differently mentally from launching the app that reached a lot of people to launching and publishing the book, because there was a big difference and a big learning in both of those projects. The app, what I didn't share with everyone, even though we reached a bunch of people, the business model wasn't working, so we actually had to shut it down, which, I mean, is a whole other podcast and topic. But one of the many learnings in that experience was that we, and definitely I, got hung up on the numbers, the downloads and the reach, which at the end of the day didn't matter, because the core product, wasn't converting, and the business model was failing. So when I was about to release the book, of course, thankfully, because of the podcast, I've been able to interview a lot of best-selling authors. So I was able to pick their minds and their brains to understand, okay, what can I do to reach as many people with the book? So still similar question, but here's the difference, or where it changes. I'll do everything, or try some strategies that these experts are telling me. But my main intention was, because one of the strategies was to, surprisingly, you're not going to be surprised with this, but to book myself on 100 podcasts, essentially, and have them all released around publication, which I did. But the goal was to just be present, which comes back to how I answered the question, because it wasn't about, doesn't matter how big the show is or where that may go and so forth. It was, can I really truly connect with the person on the other side or in person, as a conversation and as human beings, and just deliver the best value that I can about the topic of the book and so forth. And if I can say yes to that, then I know that people on the other side will get the best version of me. And if that leads to book landing on bestseller lists, then great. But if not, that's not the measurement that I'm personally measuring myself with. So that was the big difference, because it's easy to get wrapped up into, bestseller lists and stuff. And there's whole strategies, obviously, for that to happen. But that insight from the app was really helpful to not fall in that trap again.
Thank you for sharing that. And obviously, if you want to know more about Marc's story, there's two ways that you can. One, grab yourself a copy of the book, because he shares it in there. And two, if you've loved this episode and you want to know more, let us know. And we can always bring Marc back for a part 2 and discuss the lessons that he learned in building an app which had 90 million downloads. And I think it is so, so important that we do say that. And thank you for sharing about the metrics, because in the world that we live in today, it is so easy to look at big numbers and confuse yourself that 1 million followers on Instagram means £1 million, $1 million, a bajillion in the bank. The data drives the decisions. But how do we truly know? And how do we know how fast the data is going to change? And so much of what Marc's been talking about, from my point of view, and when I say this is an amazing book, I am somebody who, since my wake up call in 2012, has read pretty much every single new hit book that's come out. That's hundreds, if not thousands of books. Yes, I've got Audible. Yes, I've got a Kindle. Yes, I've bought the physical copies of the book. Yes, I've gone to the library and got these copies of the book. What Marc has done in this book is he has taken all of this and condensed it. And this has come, in my opinion, from the conversation that we've had here today, from his process of constantly questioning and refining and refining and refining. And it comes back to a story that I've told on the podcast before about when you see somebody who is really exceptionally good at what they do, the misunderstanding that people make is, well, they're so good it must be easy. No, they make it look easy because they did the work to get there. And the story that I often use is a skiing analogy. Not sure if you're a skier, if you get much snow out there in Canada, Marc. I am not a skier. My brother is a skier. I'm sure my sister is a skier. We've not really discussed it. She's a yogi more than a skier these days. But you look at these people zigzagging down and it looks effortless. And here's the thing about that, they have practiced to get it effortless. So if things that Marc has discussed today have resonated with you, I cannot recommend enough getting the book, going through this process, even asking yourself one question. Now, I said we were wrapping up the episode, but there is one extra question that I want to get in. At the very end of your book, Marc, you said, "What do I want from my life?" is a question you would encourage us, the readers, to ask. What do you want from your life is the question I want to ask you.
The answers evolve over time, but as of right now, I want to be connected and to work with just brilliant and great people and form long-term relationships and partnerships. And what I'm realizing that is probably um, less relationships, less projects, but just more intentional and of higher quality, which links to exactly what I mentioned about kind of mind mapping, where I'm putting my time and effort. I want beautiful experiences, and then of course with my family and friends, to have the time to be present with them as well, and not always be thinking of the next opportunity or a project that I'm working on or working on a proposal. Because I think as an entrepreneur, it's easy to always be thinking about your business because you're so excited about it. So yeah, it comes back to two answers then, again, presence in every moment, as much as I can, and just really aligned in great relationships and partnerships.
Oh, I love that. I got tingles from that. Last two questions. What have you got coming up in 2024?
I'm doing more and more work with companies and teams around integrating mental fitness and not having them as one-off, keynote experiences, and more so that's the introduction to the topic. But then let's work together for 6 or so months to really look at your business processes, your status meetings, your product launches, and integrate mental fitness to support and complement what you're doing in a business. And then I've got a couple product ideas that would support the book. So we'll see. Stay tuned to that.
Exciting. Watch this space. Final question. Where can we connect with you? Where do you hang out in the online world?
I mean, the easiest place is just to navigate over to behindthehuman.com, which is also the title of the podcast, but that's where you'll find the book. That's where you'll find the socials, LinkedIn, Instagram, and so forth. I'm probably most active on LinkedIn and Instagram, but I'm accessible. So please, send me if you're enjoying this episode, share it out as you mentioned, Abigail, but I would say, and also put the question that really has impacted your life or one that's on your mind, so we can reshare that. Because what I've learned with questions is we could all benefit from them, and the more we share, the more that we can help other people, and the ripple effect is exponential.
And as always, we leave all the links for everything in the show notes. Marc, it has been a pleasure and an honor to have you on the podcast.
Right back at you. Thank you so much.
And my friends, as we wrap up this conversation today, remember, stay safe, stay well, and it's your time. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you loved what you heard, be sure to let me know by leaving a review so I can keep the good stuff coming. Come and say hi on Instagram at Success by Design Training, or visit my website successbydesigntraining.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search Abigail Barnes. Until next time, don't forget, you are amazing and it's your time.